Uh, this is the Building Brands and Social Networking, Word of Mouth and Community Marketing panel. My name is Jason Friedenfelds. I'm with Ziff Davis Game Group and the One Up Network. And I guess I'll just let the speakers introduce themselves. So, Ian.
Hi, my name is Ian Schaefer. I am the CEO and founder of Deep Focus. We are a interactive agency, full-service interactive agency for the entertainment and lifestyle industries. So we work with nearly every Hollywood studio, many cable networks. Prior to starting Deep Focus, I was VP of New Media at Miramax Films. You know, our experience with social networking, which is why we're here, has regularly been recognized as industry leading. We've recently launched major campaigns for brands such as Superman and Entourage and release of Clerks 2, all with social networks and predominantly MySpace. So that is my brief intro.
That's great. My name is Hank Pronk. I'm with Got Marketing. We're an email marketing company. And my role is enterprise sales. So I'm here to talk about email marketing as it pertains to word of mouth. And is there anybody here in the group that's in marketing? Hands? Sales? Is anybody planning to do email marketing? Is anybody doing email marketing? You are? Okay. All right. Thanks.
My name is Mike Manello. I'm with Campfire. I started out via the world of film. I was involved in the Blair Witch Project, the first one, and then shortly after that connected with Chelsea Pictures, a production company, to form Campfire. We do Blair Witch type campaigns, I guess, for brands. We've done Sharp. We did a campaign called Beta 7 for Sega, ESPN, and most recently we did a campaign for Audi called Art of the Heist.
Hi, my name is Sheetal, and I am co-founder of an agency called Shanth Interactive. We are based in Los Angeles, and we do marketing and communications for technology and entertainment companies. We work with startups all the way to more established companies. We try to take into account a lot of these new forms of media and how they sort of fit within a quote-unquote traditional framework.
Hello, I'm Anthony Batt. I'm the CEO and founder of BuzzNet, and we publish a social network primarily focused on media. So our audience is male, female, but very enthusiastic about publishing their media they collect. They are responsible for driving well over 70,000 page views per month, and we're growing very rapidly.
Okay, I think we'll dive in with my first question, which comes out of my own work. At Ziff Davis Game Group, we're building the One Up Network as an online community targeting gamers. And it's also intended as a marketing platform for reaching young males or gamers. But that assumes marketers would want to use an existing infrastructure like ours in the first place. So my question is, what have you found is the right balance between using existing infrastructure, either online like MySpace or OneUp.com, or real-life events like concerts, like going to Coachella and having some kind of presence there? How do you balance that infrastructure that you build yourself or infrastructure that is existing?
I guess I could take a stab at that. Primarily, when we're using social networks, we're using social networks not only to and of course word of mouth marketing, to not only engage audiences around a particular brand or product, but also to get them to perform an action that isn't necessarily taken within the confines of the social network. So, you know, so for example, you know, if we're doing something for a film, we need to make sure that we get people actually away from interacting with that social network and into a movie theater. Or if we're, you know, working with a television program, to get them to actually turn on the television and do something that's not necessarily blogging. They could blog while they watch, which would be cool. But the point is that we're constantly bridging that that gap between media. And it's oftentimes very important to do something like that if you really want to create what we would like to call a phenomenon. You know, you can do something online and that's great, but if you really want to envelop the consumer, if you really want to expose and engage them with a brand over an extended period of time, it really does need to transcend the medium. So, you know, recently we worked on a campaign with Court TV where we actually took out billboards in New York and LA that were advertising. It was basically a Dear John letter from a wife to her husband who she realized cheated on her. And it was, you know, basically calling him out right then and there on the billboard. We developed an online personality for her, created a community around her. And within 3 days, she got book deals, offers to appear on the Today Show and Good Morning America, and the word spread. And within those 3 days, we had over 1 million visitors to that blog. It was something we thought would take, you know, optimistically about 2 weeks to do, but it happened in 3 days. So the moral of the story is, if you can, you know, take a brand or a campaign and allow it to become larger than the medium that it lives within, which is a challenging task in itself. But if you can figure out how to do that, it's a great way to get audiences energized about your brand.
I have some thoughts on that as well, to your question. So for us, we're trying to capture the media collecting culture online. So we're really not trying to drive the consumer to a theater or to a store. We're just trying to actually entertain them while they're online. And so, for instance, Coachella, which is the largest North American music festival, who really has a huge community. They keep coming back to the same concert every year. They approached us and they said, how do we create a community for them? Because after they leave this festival, they're going to have millions and millions of digital assets, and they want to, you know, sustain that audience after they leave. So we were able to take our platform and help them build a community so that their audience and their customer can collect the media, but also share it in a single place, and also interact with each other, which is a really, really powerful way for people to connect, but also connect around something they're passionate about, which is like the Coachella Music Festival. And so in that weekend, we collected almost 10,000 photos and several thousand videos. And I don't know the exact number of signups because that's still continuing, but we worked with the owner of that festival, and it was very successful. We're going to do more festivals of that as well. But they did want to use an existing platform that can actually scale rather than have to build a website. And we see most people coming to us talking about community or social networks, they're actually confused. They think it's a website. Mm-hmm. And it's not a website. When you're dealing with millions of simultaneous users uploading and downloading media, you're not building a website, you're building an infrastructure. And you know, I've had a lot of time and experience building large-scale infrastructures for that kind of behavior, and so we make a logical you know, partner in those kinds of cases.
I just want to add to that too. I think it really depends on who your target is and who your client is, because I mean, we're talking a lot today about a lot of entertainment companies and people with maybe bigger budgets, but if you sort of, you know, drill it down to smaller companies, what's exciting about a lot of these forms of new media is that they're easier to enter, and you know, there's not as much competition. I mean, if you look at the Arctic Monkeys, that was a great example. They didn't have like a label. They went in there, they promoted their own music, and then they got a label. You know, we've worked with a lot of startup companies that don't have a big budget and maybe aren't going to get the attention they need in the press, so we sort of use bloggers. And how do we get them to, you know, vouch for them and do our job for us?
Yeah, for us, to echo that, it depends on the brand, it depends on the product, and it depends on the target audience and all of that. And then the other issue for us is it depends on the idea of what it is we're doing. So in a case like the Beta 7 campaign, our audience was gamers. And we wanted to go after sports gamers, specifically football gamers. So there were already so many places where those guys were hanging out and talking that we didn't need to build our own. Mm-hmm. Whereas with Sharp, it was a completely different audience. We're selling $8,000 high-def LCD TVs, so we built our own space for them.
Okay.
I'd like to add to that as well. We're a self-serve solution. We're email marketing. So for an organization to get into email marketing on their own, it's very complex, very difficult. It takes a long time to get into this space. We're set up already. One of the biggest issues out there on the internet right now is email violations. For every violation of an email that gets broadcasted is about $5,000 per violation. And one of our big customers that now is a customer, they tried to do it on their own, and they did an email blast doing the word of mouth thing, and they made a mistake, and they were fined $40 million.
Oops.
So they prefer to outsource that part of their business now.
Yeah. Okay. And that sort of leads into my next question about this question of, whether if you're going to use an existing infrastructure that's not yours, or create a new one, how do you create authenticity, and how do you ensure authenticity, credibility? How do you evade your target's fakeness radar, if you want to call it that? Do you need to use irony and self-deprecation to mitigate any potential backlash, or maybe authenticity doesn't even mean the same thing to the younger, do-it-yourself, plugged-in media generation that makes their own media? Maybe they don't see a conflict between the branding that comes from the companies and their own identities and their own media creation. So again, that question of authenticity.
Well, at Shantha, we have a group of 400 cultural investigators that are sort of based primarily in Asia and in the US, and they sort of help us keep tabs on what they think is cool or not. And one of the things that I find really interesting is they've grown up with advertising. So if they're playing a video game and the billboard doesn't have an ad, or the NASCAR doesn't have an ad, that's not natural for them. But at the same time, begs the question, are they really listening? And what they are looking for is an experience and feeling emotionally connected to it. And I think that's what we're sort of seeing with, the formation of online networks and so forth.
I would say that authenticity is really key to adoption. And I deal with a younger audience, and it has to be authentic for them to ever come back, and that's why we let the audience really program the content for themselves and for their friends. We're always trying to tell brands that that's really the way to go. Now, there's a big risk for that because they don't want kids to program for the brand because they could put something up that's offensive, and we've had to deal with that. We did a deal with PlayStation and Master Foods where we built an entire social network for them, and they're mildly happy, and we had kids programming the content for this site that they did, and it's still too complex for the brand managers to understand about how media is being, where the young want to control media and not be controlled by media. And so we're sort of kind of, telling that story, and we're winning some battles, but I think it's it will happen really quick, and when it happens, it will be a really interesting world. But authenticity, very important.
Yeah, this is going to sound funny coming from a guy involved with Blair Witch, but for us, transparency is actually really important. I mean, on the Audi campaign, the Sharp campaign, and both were very upfront about what they were. It was like there's pretty much no way you could run into the Audi campaign and not instantly know that you were involved in a campaign. And for us, we rely on the content to actually overcome that. And it's like, you create something that people want, and the fact that it's branded doesn't matter because we're giving them an experience that they're looking for.
Yeah, and I think another word that we can use that slightly similar and slightly different is honesty, and being able to put the product, even as a form of product sampling, in the hands of consumers within these communities, within these empowered and galvanized groups of audiences. I mean, it's, to allow them to play around with the product, to allow them to, to watch an extended, maybe the first 8 minutes of a movie, or allow them to listen to a few tracks off an album, or to, be able to take a coupon to a store and get a free sample of a product. I mean, these are things that will empower these audiences to be able to make their own decisions about the product. And as an advertiser or marketer, you need to feel as confident about your product as you think you can be if you're going to actually do this kind of thing. So you have to anticipate the negative response along with the positive ones. But if you're willing to really get behind those positive responses and know that the response very well might be overwhelmingly positive, then that's a tremendous asset to use. And although we've seen that backfire with someone like a Dell, where Dell has just it's not a good time if you're a Dell PR flag. For the last couple of years, you've gotten individual bloggers on crusades to crucify the company because of their poor customer service, and then, just when that starts to die down, the laptops start catching on fire. So, word gets around and word of mouth spreads, especially when people feel as passionate about something as they do their personal computer. So you have to be really careful with what you put out there, but also very confident with what you put out there. And if you're not confident, then maybe, opening yourself up to the wrath of the community is not the right strategy for you.
I think the other thing too is not to be scared to be engaged as a brand person or a marketer. I mean, an example I like to use, I was talking to the Palm CMO a while back, and he was telling me how they're launching some product, and there was a blogger who was completely saying all these awful things about this product, and he was really influential. So we emailed the blogger, they set up a time to meet. The Palm CMO goes to the place, and he knocks on the door. He's like, oh, he invited me to his house. He knocks on the door. He says, well, where's John? And his mom's like, he's upstairs in his room. Ends up being a 14-year-old kid that the Palm CMO is having this conversation with and convincing him, hey, well, why are you dissing our product? But you can't be scared to kind of roll up your sleeves. And I think it's a time where we don't have research to back anything up. We don't have, this is what's worked and this isn't going to work. I think you just kind of have to go by the fly and be flexible. And, and just one more point, too, that I was thinking about earlier. There's a book called Brand Hijack, which I don't know if you guys have read it or not, but I think it's a good read in terms of having people sort of understand this whole losing control and what that may or may not mean.
Yeah, I mean, honesty is good. We've actually found that when in our projects, when somebody comes on and starts speaking negatively, like in Audi, for example, we found that the community actually corrects it on their own, because we're providing an experience that they love. So, every day someone would come on and go, "You're all a bunch of idiots. This is an ad for Audi. Don't you know you're being sold a car?" And people would go, "Yeah, and either hang around and have fun or go."
Right.
Yeah, but Sheila raised an interesting point. There was a Seinfeld episode. It was actually just on the other day, where they're in a store online, waiting to return some merchandise, and this woman starts freaking out and she's saying, "This is the worst." I'm sorry, it was Will and Grace episode. I never watched Will and Grace. I can't believe I just confused those two shows. But the woman over there, she kept screaming, and she was everybody's worst nightmare, in the store. Not from a customer service or product perspective, but from this customer's annoying perspective. And there was a time when you could, as a service or an advertiser or marketer, you could just roll your eyes and ignore it, and it would go away. Now you've got 14-year-old kids that have, that can speak to 20,000 people, and you can't do that anymore. You need to carry on these relationships, and you need to pay attention to what's going on, because at the end of the day, this is the pulse of your audience base and your customer base. Yeah,
it's a dialogue.
Yeah.
I think they're using all these platforms and mediums as a megaphone, and it's really whether executives are listening or not, because the information's there. A lot of it is free market research, in fact.
So that example of Palm leads me to a question about there's this sense of going out into the community and pushing a brand out into a community, crafting something and going out. But I'd also like to ask about this idea of opening up the shop. And this is something that our editors, especially with the One Up Show, which is our video podcast, and some of our magazines, Official US PlayStation Magazine is doing this a lot, and Computer Gaming World, rather than just reviewing games and using the traditional PR route where the company supplies you kind of a prepackaged message, instead as a media company saying, no, we want your game designers and programmers to come out from behind that glossy PR wall and come out and just talk candidly about the game, talk about what challenges there were in developing it, what they don't like about it, what they do like about it, and whether they wish they had done more with it. So it's something that our readers really enjoy because it's a little more candid. So again, instead of going out, have you made efforts to open up the shop and pull the end users in to the brand, into the company, the inner workings?
I actually think that's pretty crucial. That is, I think, the one thing about the Blair Witch campaign, for as much as has been written about it, that's completely been ignored, because people kind of go, oh, it was a cool website that told a story. But when we launched the site, there were two parts. It was the story part, and then there was the, we're five guys struggling to keep the lights on and making this movie. And we answered every email. We responded to the forum posts, and it was an actual true dialogue. And we had an email newsletter that was talking about kind of the struggles we were going through editing the film, trying to get the film into festivals, you know, how much it was going to cost to make posters and how we didn't have that money. I mean, it was completely open in that respect, which is. Are
there pitfalls to that though? Opening up like that? Did you find that sometimes you wish you had a little more of a moat?
No, I mean we were pretty good. I mean we were all pretty good about not saying something we'd regret later.
Okay.
But no, we didn't have any problems at all, and I think it's because people just felt like we were honest and we were talking to them, and what it did was it gave people a vested interest in the success of the film. So, you know, by the time we premiered at Sundance, before we had a distributor, you know, we played in Park City at midnight, and there were something like 400 kids from Salt Lake City who had made the trek up the mountain to see a film that had been sold out before they got in the car to go up the mountain, just to try to get a standby ticket. And it was just because they felt like they knew we were going to be there and they wanted to meet us. And it's just taking the time to have that dialogue with people. I mean, for us, you know, we were selling Blair Witch, and we knew the hardcore fans by name. And as we traveled, as the film was opening, we were meeting them. We were making a point to say, we're going to be here. We're going to go to the Starbucks across the street after the movie if you want to come and meet us. And I think that's really essential.
Yeah, and that's, you know, and it started out, and I think probably the easiest form for something like that is in the entertainment side of things, where, you know, you'll have, you know, like what happened with Blair, which is a perfect example, and then you have you know, someone like Bryan Singer, who captures his production diaries and releases them as podcasts, you know, for the release before the release of Superman, to get people involved and make them feel like they're playing along with the production of the film, and they know all this stuff, and they really do get a vested interest in the sense that they want to go see the finished product and the product of all the blood, sweat, and tears. What that has actually led to, though, is an interesting phenomenon on the product marketing side. So you've got, you know, people that have basically been anointed by the companies they work for as brand ambassadors. So, you know, if you look at what this is in your world, like the Xbox 360 group has done, you know, you've got guys that, you know, yeah, I mean, I'm in the business, but I play games a lot too, and, you know, it's all in the name of research. And, you know, I know these guys, like this guy Jay Allard, who was the, you know, spearhead of Xbox 360, was very open, very, you know, very willing to talk with the community. You've got this guy Major Nelson, who's essentially, you know, one of their senior game developers, who now spends, as part of his job, a lot of time online in the Xbox Live online community, playing games, and you could find this guy and go play against him, you know, from the comfort of your living room. And that's, you know, talk about involving audiences in the product, and, you know, they're very open. They listen to audiences. You know, they're releasing games for free that you can download. I mean, it's a very open community, and I think that's really led to a lot of its success. You look at some of the top-selling console games now. You know, the majority of them are Xbox 360 titles, and there's a lot to be said for that, and I think a lot of that is that open dialogue, that involvement, that making you feel like you're a part of something bigger.
So is the role then of the marketing PR people to, how do you go about then identifying those people who would make good spokespeople internally and vet them? Like, I know that for Microsoft, Cliff Bleszinski is developing Gears of War, and I think a few years ago he wasn't like the most polished guy. Now he looks like, you know, a model for like a clothing company, and the New York Times does style pieces on him. And he's the developer, he is the techie guy, but he's also become, they've kind of grown him into this personality. Is there an active role you have to take to open it out and turn those people into spokespeople?
Well, here's an example, not using films, just to kind of take another example. One of our clients, it was a small startup. This guy had created this software, Apple-based software, in his garage, literally, and wanted to launch it at Macworld. Didn't have a lot of money, and it was really sort of niche. It was just for storytelling, so a really small audience. We did a really small blogger relations campaign, but what we found is that people sort of found its own audience, so much so that at the show at Macworld, some guy from the LAPD said, I just came by to say this is a great software, we follow gangs using it. And so this company has sort of used these new applications that they hear from the bloggers and tries to sell it that way. And, you know, all that hype for a really cheap and cheap amount of work, they won Best of Show, which is pretty cool, and that was really authentic, and he stayed really connected to his community.
I have some thoughts on that as well. To your original question, we heard transparency, honesty, and authenticity, and for our audience, which is a younger audience, they're sort of moving away from sort of a professional packaged piece of media, something so well put together that it's kind of lame. And so we see more and more people or kids wanting to have something that's kind of reality based. And if you look at a lot of MTV programming, it's all sort of like reality TV programming. Even though there's some like narrative and editing going on in there, it's all sort of like, hey, this is real. Hey, we're talking to you. You're watching us. It's kind of a dialogue. It's not, professional, polished episode kind of stuff. And so we're seeing a trend where, again, more honest, more authenticity, and I think if you take a guy that's in a company that's talking about the product in a very earnest way and sort of engaging the audience, the audience can find your products. They can use the internet. It's not like they can't find it. But when they find it, can they interact with it? Can they find someone there that can help them understand your product more? That's like a tipping point. And if you suddenly take the guy that's helping you and turn him into a poster boy, he becomes inauthentic, and I think that's a backfire. And so I think that if you're gonna, musicians, we have some of the top acts that actually keep a very verbose photo blog on our site, and their photos get 70, 100,000 views, 450 comments per photo, and it's very earnest. And they also have a MySpace page, but the MySpace page is really just like add me as a friend. And what kids really want, and if you're marketing to a younger group, you really want to have a way to communicate to them that doesn't seem like you're trying to scam them, that you really want to talk to them in their own language.
Yeah, we found that the audiences will tell us who they want to talk to, and I agree that the more polished, the less value there is in the person being out there. So, like on the Beta 7 campaign, for instance, it was the main character was attacking Sega, but we found that the audience was really in awe of the two guys who were the head of visual concepts, the developer of the game. And so we brought them into the story, and we shot some video with them, and they were, they're not actors, but they played along, and the audience just loved it. They loved seeing, the lead developer in his shorts and t-shirt sitting at his desk talking to the camera. I mean, they just absolutely loved it, and they loved the fact that we did that, and they loved the fact that they, in a way, kind of asked for it, and then we gave it to them.
Yeah, it's really the difference between real and fake, and I think real is really working well nowadays.
Well, it's like what we talked about earlier. We were all talking about the movie Snakes on a Plane, which I believe is coming out tonight. One of the things that I thought was interesting, and I know some of you guys have actually worked on marketing aspects of the film, but they had such a huge chatter while they were actually making the film that some of the writers and producers decided to incorporate some of the feedback into the film, and because of that, they've gained a huge community and fan base already. So it'll be interesting to see how well the movie does and how that actually plays out.
Right, and that also, an interesting thing about that is there was a lot of what can be perceived as, like fan art and, mashups of videos and stuff that looks like people have done to support the film was, I mean, not to pull back the curtain, but it's actually generated by the studio too. So, it's authentically fake or fakely real.
But it appears real. I mean, even though it might be contrived, it appears real.
Right.
Like it's not like so professionally produced that the kid goes, one of these next.
Right. It's funny. It's genuinely entertaining.
Right.
And that, at the end of the day, is the most important part. It's, when it comes to something like that, no one cares like, oh, who's the guy that made that one? It's just they care about what that one is. With that spoof of whatever video game using snakes on a plane is, people are, they're entertained by it. And I think that's the most important thing.
The studio actually listened. I think that's the part. They interacted because they heard what they were saying and did something.
Okay. I want to talk a little about something that I'm thinking of as frictionless marketing, the idea that this is actually prompted by something my dad was telling me, which was his contention was you're always going to have some element of pushing a message at people who don't necessarily want to hear it. And so the question is it inevitable that advertising and marketing will always have this element of pushing unwanted messages, or is it possible to virtually eliminate that sense of resistance? And how close are we today to removing that resistance? How close could we get, and is that even desirable, or is a certain amount of resistance or a certain amount of messages not being wanted, is that maybe actually better in the overall equation?
You know, I think a lot of it has to do with, you know, there are three reactions that someone can have with advertising, really. One is it can get them to do, you know, to activate the desired response that the advertiser would like. And, you know, the other two are become overwhelmingly resistant to it, and then the third is just simply ignore it. And I think marketers can tolerate the, you know, the ignorance and the action, but it's the resistance that's the most troubling aspect of it. And, you know, advertising has become such a accepted aspect of our lives in the sense that, you know, we expect it. I should say it's been an expected aspect of our lives, not necessarily accepted. But you know, I think there are a lot of things that can be done to you know, to at least make things a little less frictioned. You know, probably one is, you know, for example, if you look at, let's look at MySpace, where people set up these, you know, you set up your profiles, and that's your, you know, your personality. It's an extension of you, who you are. Your profile is covered with, you know, dating ads and, you know, things for mortgages and, you know, squash the monkey stuff. You know, it's like all these kinds of things that you probably don't want. I mean, like, what if, you know, as a, you know, owner of a profile on MySpace, you could actually pick and choose the advertisers that you'd want to be on your site? Doesn't that have like probably a much bigger value? It's like, you know, these guys, you know, these kids look up to guys like skaters, for example, who they're sponsored. You know, NASCAR drivers, their cars are covered with this stuff. Golfers, you know, a lot of professional athletes, you know, especially in individual sports, are sponsored, and they choose the sponsors that they want, and it makes that association more favorable to the consumer. So if you can kind of, you know, empower consumers to even in some cases choose the advertisers that support the content that they're creating, that might contribute to, you know, more frictionless atmosphere.
Yeah, you know, we're working with a really smart CMO right now on a project, and his philosophy is how does our presence on wherever he is make that place better? Mm-hmm. And it's like that's a very important philosophy for him, and I think that's vital. And I mean, we ask that question all the time. It's like, I'll always fight against in-cinema ads. I don't care how effective people tell me they are. You know, I hate them, and I think most people hate them. And
part of that is maybe there's a short-term versus long-term consideration there. So you.
Yeah, but it's also what you're putting in the space. So, for instance, when we place an ad through the Blog Ads Network and we select where it's going to play, we also are very concerned with the ad itself and that it's not, you know, bright pink and flashing and it's going to give everybody epileptic seizures and things like that. It's like, you know, really, like, how can we put something on this blog that's going to be interesting to the readers of this actual blog, and that's something that they're going to want and be intrigued by. And it's like just applying that across the board to everything we do.
This is a big issue in the email space. People like to use email for marketing their products and their branding. The problem is people are getting hundreds of emails a day, and you know, they can filter them, they can delete them, they can junk them, they can ignore them. So how do you get around that? And a lot of our customers, the way they find they can get around that is to convince people to take your email and forward it on to somebody they know. So, if David, who I know really well, sends me an email, the odds of me opening it are going to be a lot higher than if somebody I don't know sends me an email. And that makes it so there's all sorts of ways of encouraging people to forward emails. So if you forward an email to a friend, you get extra points. If you forward an email to a friend, you get a coupon. If you forward this to a friend, you get maybe a free coffee at Starbucks or something. And that's been very effective. And the solution that we provide provides reporting, so we can actually tell if when they refer to a friend, if that friend actually opened the email. We can tell after they open it if they actually clicked on any of the links. And this behavior reports back to our customers, and they can readjust their marketing strategies.
Is there any danger there with a pyramid scheme mentality, like a backlash to that, where you're feeling like, oh, I got this nice message from my friend, and then, you know, a few days later you're like, wait a minute, I think they got a free coupon because they sent that thing to me. I don't want to, you know, I feel there's like, is there a betrayal danger there?
There can be, although we find our customers, if they're, let's say they're retail and they're targeting a certain age group, let's say 12 to 14, and they're selling skateboard equipment and clothing, the odds are that this person they referred it to wants to do the same thing, because
Okay.
they'll also want to visit this website because it's cool.
Okay.
Right, and that's the thing. It's making you feel okay about receiving messaging like that. You know, we just did this big campaign for HBO's Entourage, where we put a layer over MySpace called My Entourage, and we basically just, and then this is going along, Michael, with something that you said. It's, you know, making audiences incorporate what they're already doing into an advertising experience. So, you know, what we did was, you know, they're already creating profiles for themselves, but in this case, we empowered them to create profiles for their group of 4 friends. And we had over 400 groups created of, you know, of guys and girls that wanted to be, you know, the winning entourage. And we had a whole judging system based on popularity and look and feel of the website and the efforts that they took. So yeah, we had about 450 groups of 4, each of which were competing in what was ostensibly a popularity contest. So we were actually encouraging them to get friends, you know, to their profiles. So, you know, each one of those 400 groups, you know, had, you know, 100, 200, 300, in some cases 1,000 friends. And we reached a whole lot of people with this marketing message. And the marketing message itself was actually the personality of the participating groups that wanted to be just like the show Entourage. So, you know, we rewarded the winners with cars and trips to LA and all these, you know, this great stuff. But people created, you know, one group, the winning group, actually shot an entire episode of Entourage using themselves in the show. We had guys that, you know, that got a lot of friends, and one of the friends was a journalist at a newspaper, and then, you know, newspaper did a big cover story on these guys. You know, and so, you know, we wanted them to be part of the show and also do something that they're comfortable, you know, doing, which is setting up and creating profiles and gaining friends on MySpace. So
yeah, I think Ian's describing the most non-frictional advertising in the world, and we see that as well. You know, we have, you know, thousands of kids that decorate their pages with, you know, essentially advertisement. You know, it's like, here's my favorite band, here's my favorite video of a band, here's my favorite, you know, book, etc. I mean, that is advertising. They talk about the clothes they're buying, the clothes they don't like as well. But I mean, that's non-frictional when someone's actually just decorating and showing photos of the stuff they love.
Yeah, I mean, I think consumers are cleaning up the marketing industry. I mean, that's why we're talking about being authentic if we're worried about it. And I think it's important. I think there's always going to be a little bit of friction, but marketers are just not propagandists. I mean, the other thing that we do is really take complex messages and explain it. People want information, and, you know, that's the other, I think, more important part of our job.
yeah, it's kind of like the one of the things that we describe it as is like the wicketization of consumers. It's basically this self-editing, very democratic way of, you know, combing through the BS and getting to, you know, what's honest. And I think, you know, consumers are getting a lot better at it as they're, you know, being empowered in communicating with each other. So, like, you know, it's a gigantic brain trust as opposed to, you know, what used to be all this one-to-one, you know, promise stuff. It's more like one-to-one to many. And, you know, this many, the collective consciousness of this many is able to sift through that BS.
Yeah, they're not just getting better at it, they're flocking to the tools that enable them to, right? It's dig.com and it's YouTube and it's all those things that you know, now it's like it's not enough to just blast something out there in front of millions of eyeballs. You've got to get, you know, that 14-year-old to endorse it.
Right,
by
right.
posting it to YouTube and giving it a 5-star vote, or, you know, by digging it.
Well,
So-
the thing is, they grew up with it. So if they're watching Apprentice and they see the Apprentice do a project on Dove, they get it. I mean, they're not dumb. They get the Dove probably paid for the spot. And so they're getting smarter too, but at the same time, maybe they're learning something about it, you know?
Okay, that brings up the idea of new tools. Everyone's getting familiar with blogs, social networking, and even the word-of-mouth campaigns are getting to be something that most marketers have heard of and consumers are getting more familiar with. Do you think there are tools that are just on the horizon, things that you're seeing that you're starting to experiment with, maybe think about, that you think that consumers mostly haven't heard about or that marketers mostly haven't heard about? And those, you know, in some cases there might be things consumers know about that marketers don't know about, or vice versa.
Well, we've been doing a lot of work with Lyndon Linden Lab's second life. So I would say virtual worlds is really the future of marketing and marketers and sort of where all of that's going.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we've been looking at different ways of delivering advertising, both strategically and technologically. One of the things that we've been messing around with, because I can really only describe it as messing around with, but we've empowered audiences to make all the advertising that we give them portable. So the ability for them to take the advertising that we give them, especially if it's video assets, and instantly make it put it onto your iPod, not going through some system of downloading a zip file and then unpacking the zip file and then dragging something, a file from there into iTunes and then putting it on your iPod. We're talking like one click right to your iPod, to your video iPod, to your audio iPod, whatever. Or sending it to your cell phone so you have it. And that's kind of real interesting to us, because that's that media transcendency or transcendence that I was talking about earlier, where it can impact outside that medium. So, for example, if you drag this movie trailer onto your iPod, or subscribe to a video RSS feed where you're constantly being given new content, and you're sitting on the subway or in a car or in a public place, and you're watching this piece of content and someone's looking over your shoulder, that's word of mouth marketing. It's passive, but it works, and people are looking at the content that you're consuming in these public places, and it's important for us to make that at least possible. The effects of which, it's not necessarily 100% measurable yet, but it's certainly something that we're toying with.
I saw an interesting technology in the grocery store. There's these eggs that have ads on them.
Eggs that have what?
Ads on them.
Oh, that's interesting.
For us, we go where the audience is. So I find that new tools sometimes, if they're too new, and we try to force people into them, it's just another barrier to entry. So we tend to, and we actually tend to, sometimes we just throw media out there and then let people take it where they want to go, and then embrace where they're putting it. It's kind of, so it's letting them take the lead.
Okay. Measurement has come up a little bit, and this is obviously a big concern when you're going into these new forms of integrated or more anything that's non-traditional. Measurement suddenly becomes an issue. So, talk a little about measurement, how you've dealt with it, and what tools you see coming up soon that you're going to be incorporating to show results a little more tangibly. Return on investment.
Well, we're talking about email. The companies we're dealing with, one of the measurements they want to consider is traffic to their website, traffic to the product. They want to see that measured, and they want to see that increased all the time. And they want to see quality traffic. They don't want to just see numbers. They want to see these people are coming in and they're purchasing, or they're doing something of value to both the consumer and the retailer.
Is that changing? Are you seeing an increasing sophistication in the kind of metrics they're looking for? Are you pushing them to look for new metrics?
Absolutely. I mean, on the internet you can trace almost for everything. I mean, not only can you trace for, who's opened the email, who's actually clicked, but who they forwarded to. I mean, it's pretty scary in terms of the information that's coming back that can be captured, and a lot of organizations don't realize this information is out there. Once they find it's out there, then they're scrambling around looking for web analytical products, high-end, very complex reporting products, because they want to report this back to management and in the whole cycle of the organization, production, sales, etc.
Yeah, I mean, one measurement that everyone's trying to get a hold of is the elusive concept of engagement, and like what constitutes engagement. How do you measure the time spent with a brand or activities spent with a brand beyond, the simple like CPM focused, ad tracking, impressions, clicks, things like that. Rich Media has helped give us a better idea of, how long somebody is spending watching a video that's in a paid ad placement, or, whether it's been forwarded around, or how long a mouse is hovering over the ad, things like that. But, it's things that go beyond that inventory-based advertising that we're real keen on measuring. If you're looking at, working with a social network, it's looking at, yeah, the number of friends, which is an obvious thing. You're looking at, you know, the number of visits to the profile, the number of people that link to the profile, both within the social network, within that website, and externally. You know, the popularity, you know, of the content that's on there. If it's embedded content on a profile, how many people are grabbing that content and embedding it in other locations, things like that. Or if we're dealing with, you know, if we're dealing with other kinds of assets that exist outside of a social network, such as a commercial, you know, a trailer, you know, piece of audio. You know, we're getting it out there, and we're empowering journalists, editors, bloggers to talk about this stuff. And if they want to link to it, we've established relationships with these guys where we give them a coded link to the, you know, that can deep link them to the content, but that we're tracking in real time. So not only are we looking at, you know, which you know, websites or journalists or bloggers, what have you, are using this link, but we're looking at the number of people that are actually clicking on the link to get to the content that we're trying to send them to. So we're trying to, you know, trace all the footsteps and all the entryways into the content that we're trying to get consumers to find, you know, and hopefully it tells a nice story at the end of the day.
Yeah, we measure two things. We measure, you know, the server logs, and what we're looking at depends on the goals of that specific campaign, so it changes campaign to campaign. But we look at them constantly, and we tweak constantly on the fly. So, you know, in almost all cases, we have changed the front layer of our websites the day that we launch, as the numbers come in and we discover, like, oh, people aren't finding that link, and that's really an important link we want them to find, and we completely change it until we hit the numbers that we want. So, and that I consider that part of the dialogue with the people who are engaging with the website. And then we've also done, and it's been pretty interesting for us, they call it buzz measurements, where we take an analysis of what's being said about the company or the product or whatever it is we're marketing before we launch anything, and then measure the dialogue throughout the campaign and the effect that the campaign has on that dialogue, and that's measuring outside of our campaign what people are saying.
Is that something you're doing internally, or is that a product that you're buying? Or?
Oh, we've done both.
Okay, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I agree with what both of them are saying, but I think in general, because of new media, it's easier to measure to some degree because of the internet. But I do still think that there's a need for stronger, better measurement tools. So hopefully we'll see that kind of.
Right, and that accountability is a blessing and a curse.
Yeah, exactly.
Everyone wants to know, you know, as their budgets grow, you know, especially in this medium rather, they're you know, they're starting to be held a little more accountable for the results. And the problem is, you're spending, in many cases, you know, for national advertisers anyway, a lot less on interactive media as you are on television and print and outdoor and things like that. So, you know, the needle moving doesn't happen as dramatically, you know, with the online spend technically. Sometimes it's terribly disproportionate. Sometimes you're spending, you know, the least on the interactive media, and that's the one that's actually driving the results of a campaign. But, you know, the problem is that more often than not, it is, you know, sometimes the results are proportionate. And, you know, you have to be careful with, you know, just how accountable the medium is, because sometimes, you know, the numbers that you're talking about are not those needle-moving numbers that everyone's looking for. Everyone's looking for that big, viral, gigantic hit, you know, their Blair Witch Project, and it just doesn't happen for everybody. You have to set, you know, the bar.
Although I will say, at Campfire, we're totally embracing the, I don't look at it as a curse. I mean, actually, one of my partners here, he might kill me for saying this, but we've talked about actually working a deal with a marketer where, you know, instead of just taking a huge fee up front for our work, we'll go ahead and work for percentage based on our success. Mm-hmm. You know.
Do you think that's going to get more common, that kind of straight percentage? I mean, in a sense, that's what Google has kicked off.
Yeah, you know, I think it will. I think that's going to be one of the only ways that interactive marketers are going to be able to boost the part of the budget. I mean, you know, there was I can't recall the specific percentages, but on the Audi campaign, for instance, there was a huge ad buy, multi-million-dollar, and we had $60,000 for blog ad campaign, and we brought in like 65% of the clicks off our, you know, off our minuscule little campaign. And yeah, you know, I'd be willing to take a percentage based on that success over, you know, the folks who are buying the TV spots.
The scary thing for agencies is that there's so many other factors involved, and that, you know, you do put yourself in the hands of, like, you know, other agencies sometimes, you know, but it's I do agree. I mean, I think it's a function of, you know, what very well may be the future structure of agencies and clients, and that's a whole different panel.
So let's talk a little again about targeting. I want to talk about this tension between targeting to specific audiences and having a voice that is broken down by audience versus building a unified brand. So a lot of this feels like, you know, letting people take over might divide up the your messaging and your brand. How do you make sure that it's still cohesive, or is it even important anymore to make sure that you have a unitary, cohesive brand?
You know, yeah, I think it's becoming less important just in general, and not even just in the context of what we're talking about. I mean, if you look at, I'll pick a big national campaign that's actually a culprit of this, is Burger King. Burger King, you could, at any given point in time, Burger King's running spots that are taking probably about 6 different directions. You've got, you know, spots going on where they're chickens talking about, you know, wanting to be a French fry. You've got, you know, stunt chickens jumping over cars. You've got, you know, the king waking you up in the morning in bed next to you. I mean, there's just all these different spots out, and they're not running along a narrative, or a linear narrative anyway. Mm-hmm. And I think people are okay with that, because it's almost like casting a lot out there and putting a lot out there and seeing what resonates with your audience. And, you know, yeah, it maybe even, you know, as media becomes fragmented, maybe campaigns get more fragmented too. But I think by casting, you know, a wider net out there, you know, you are able to see what works, and Michael said this before, is, you know, react to it and look at what's going on and saying, okay, all right, well, people are really picking up on this thing, and it kind of mitigates your risk a little bit. You know, it does say that, you know, all right, now we can refocus our efforts on this, something that we know is working, and we don't have to wait till the next business or planning cycle to address it.
Are you losing some of the long-term benefit, though, of having a really solid brand that everyone is that is really consistent?
I think it's become less about, ironically, it's become less about messaging and more about personality. And I think people are, you know, especially for many brands, people are falling in love with the personality of brands. Apple, Nike, I mean, those are old examples. But even if you look at something like Burger King all of a sudden is an irreverent brand. Mm-hmm. I used to remember Burger King as the place where we picked up a paper crown. I mean, that was it. And I didn't like their French fries as well as McDonald's. But now, you know, you're looking at Burger King as this irreverent brand, someone that takes chances with their advertising, someone that puts things out there that are fun. And, you know, reverence is, you know, a little bit cliche now, but still, I mean, you could still make things that are really good that audiences will respond to. And I think it, you know, that does reinforce the personality of the brand. It's something that people respect, at least the audiences that you want to respect the brand will.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. It's all about getting the audience to embrace your brand now, rather than, you know, you can't put up that wall, that front that it used to be, where it used to be very much more propagandistic, where it's like, you know, this is who we are, boom, and there's a wall, and, you know,
yeah, and I don't know if
any of you
guys actually played along with the art of the heist. I mean, if you had an idea of what Audi's brand was, I mean, that game was spot on. That entire experience was spot on. It was performance. It was mystery. It was speed. It was, you know, it was just really dynamic, and, you know, the colors, you know, were similar to what you'd expect to find on the dashboard of an ad. I mean, it was great. The entire experience was cohesive with the personality of the brand. The messaging was kind of diluted, but that's okay. I mean, the whole idea is that you're trying to get people to fall in love with the brand and to say, I'm an Audi guy, or I'm an Audi girl. And I think that's, maybe that's a song. It was Barbie Girl. But that's the idea, is, you know, to create, you know, a personality around your brand, and that's going to really galvanize audiences around it.
I think the messages and personalities will be a lot more fragmented, because we're talking about being more authentic and really sort of honing into our audience. But what will, I think, eventually become a lot more whole is, right now we talk about marketing in terms of advertising, PR, marketing, interactive marketing. What I think is happening is that all these walls are coming down, and it's starting to blur what's what. And I think that will come together more.
Okay.
Yeah, it's less about the focus group now, and it's more about just getting out there and finding out exactly what they're saying, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if you want to know, is Burger King working? It's like, go to You're the Man Now Dog and look at how many people are playing with the image of the king.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
you know.
Okay, so do we have any crystal ball predictions next few years where you see some of this stuff going? And I know we've hit on some of this already. Are there other things that you're looking at that are going to change this?
I mean, you know, from our perspective, we're going to be paying a lot of attention, and we already have been, but a lot of attention on social networks, and not just MySpace. I mean, MySpace is gigantic, but you know, the latest figures, and latest figures are just that, they're figures. But you know, you know, they predict a couple of years out that there's going to be over $1 billion spent in advertising on using social networks, and you know, it's going to be important for advertisers, agencies, anybody involved in this game to understand, you know, the power that social networks, whether they're created around a brand or they're already existing and you're trying to inject your brand into them, you know, is to really understand, you know, what they're good for and what their leverage can be and how to advertise on social networks. The answer is probably not banner ads. The answer is probably integrated promotions and you know, really using it as a CRM tool, you know, to engage audiences over an extended period of time. So we're going to be looking at MySpace. I mean, there's obviously, you know, you've got a lot of upstart networks that are not only, you know, U.S. focused. I mean, you know, you've got guys like Bebo, which is one of the quickest growing social networks, where a lot of their audience is from the UK, but it's starting to, you know, to draw in a real solid U.S. audience. And people are going to be part of different social networks, just like they say they're, you know, a MySpace guy. Maybe now, whereas really everyone's a MySpace guy now. You know, they're going to say they're they're part of another social network because, you know what, it's going to be cooler to do that for whatever reason. So, you know, people are still going to be utilizing these things. I just think that space is going to be fragmented, and it's something that, you know, advertisers are going to have to pay very close attention to, especially the changing landscape of it all.
I think Ian's right on. I mean, I have a, you know, Buzznet.com as a social network primarily focused on media, and we're growing extremely fast, and we're seeing a lot of kids coming from MySpace as a result of the MySpace getting so kind of large and played out. And I think the advertisers are going to have to pay attention to like very niche marketing. I think that the big hit places, you know, are getting, you know, are not attracting the same type of audience or retention, and really where the marketer can actually promote themselves is in these, you know, thousands of niche markets, right, where there's lots of users that love a certain thing. So it's kind of like the long tail. It's like you have like Yahoo and, you know, these MTV, you could advertise there, but you can also advertise on 60,000 other people's blogs. Right. And you can actually communicate with, you know, tens of thousands of users in these niche markets to thousands of users. And inside of, you know, Buzznet, we have, you know, tens of thousands of users that are creating media constantly, and they all tag their media. And you can like look into each one of their tags, and you'll see thousands of images that are all about A, B, or C. And a marketer should be able to integrate a promotion or a contest or a campaign inside a very small niche, such as a tag like dogs or cats or music or movies. And so I think that the social networks that are allowing audience to program media is going to be a place where advertisers are going to actually have to wake up and really kind of roll up their sleeves and figure out how to you know, engage that audience in a one-on-one way. It's not going to be they could just drop an advertisement on the TV or drop it on the homepage of Yahoo. They're gonna have to figure out how to like really kind of deal with a niche market world, and that's what we're heading towards with the internet.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think Steven Berkoff from Audi said at one point that he'd rather have 500,000 people deeply engaged with his brand than 5 million people shrug at a spot on TV, and that's I think true. And I think more marketers and brands are going to wake up to that. That you have by aiming towards the niche, you actually have a better chance of exploding out. And this goes back. This is a lesson that I think we learned back in the Blair Witch days, when we were faced with many options throughout the process while we were making the film on our own. Whether we thought we should try and make it more commercial by sticking in footage that was not, you know, hand-held, dark and muddy looking, and changing the ending when after it was purchased by a distributor. And we just stuck to our guns, and the whole way we were told, I remember at one point we were strongly encouraged to change the ending, and we said, no, we're going to stick with the original ending. And fortunately, Artisan agreed to that. And I remember one of the big wigs at Artisan saying, well, I think you're going to make $7 million less at the box office if you go with the original ending. And it was like, all right, but we're going to do it. And I think had we changed the ending, I don't think it would have been nearly the hit that it was. Yeah. So, just aiming towards rather have a small group of people absolutely love us than a whole wide mass audience go, eh.
Mm-hmm.
If you win the niche, I think that niche is very influential, far more than what your brand can do. I mean, if Audi gets 500,000, real fans, fanatics of the cars, of the brand, they're going to actually tell 10, 20 people about how much they love their car, and that's niche marketing, and that's what these social networks are about. And our company is about building these environments where niche can actually thrive in an authentic way. So, if you have a product like an Audi and we have, 5,000 users that have tagged their media Audi and they have, 20,000 images of their car, it's a no-brainer. Advertise there. And if you influence them, they'll in turn influence others.
I think that the future things that I think we're going to be looking at Shanth is, one, I know virtual worlds, I sort of touched on that earlier, but I think they're just going to be more sophisticated social networks. So I think it's something to definitely keep our eyes out on. The other thing is, I know people talk about this all the time, globalization, but I think our audience will be more global. I mean, right now, kids think that maybe someone in New York is kind of far away, but it'll be the same thing as someone in China at some point. They'll be so comfortable with working with people virtually. And I think the third thing is starting to talk about technology not as technology, more as culture. I mean, cell phones, all these things, these are just extensions of people's lives. So I think that'll change too.
Yeah, with email marketing, we're seeing more and more intelligent use of it. So the example you spoke with earlier about your website actually changing on the fly, so to speak, based on the behavior and people hitting it and that sort of thing. We're seeing the same thing with email. People prefer to use email for word of mouth. If you do it verbally, which is a great way to do it as well, once you say it once, it disappears. And eventually people forget about it. But in email, they grab it, they like it, they sit on it, they might flag it, they might forward it on. And we're seeing systems now that can actually report back and monitor the behavior of the emails in the internet, which is pretty scary, and then do follow-up campaigns depending on the results of that initial campaign, the behavior of that initial campaign. And then that can get further and further refined depending on your audience. And you may take that same message and find, it didn't work the first time, so I'm going to try it 3 other ways. And the way that works the best, we're going to go down that path and keep refining. Maybe we may even have multiple channels of email campaigns based on age, various different types of demographics, for example. So we're going to see, very high use of email when it comes to dynamic segmentation and messaging to the end user, because it could be the same product, but you may have multiple messages you want to get out there to personalize it and target, because target's really important. But there's nothing wrong with taking the same message or same product, be it a movie or whatever it is, and then repurpose it for that particular community if you want.
Yeah, and I think it's getting more, it's going to be more and more difficult to target, specifically for communities unless you're quick, because the barriers to entry to finding these communities, whether you're communicating with them via email or communicating with them through a website, the barriers to entry to creating those communities is so low now. I mean, it's really, it's gotten to the point where just like you can, sit at home and take your digital video camera and shoot, a digital film that looks pretty darn good and edit it with the same tools that, the Hollywood studio would use. You can also create a website, that starts off as a project, and then it starts being used by a whole bunch of people, and then it becomes something big. And I just described like half the Web 2.0 companies that are out there. But that's the kind of world that we're living in. These things are changing, and people are fickle to a degree, and they're flocking to one, one or the other, and some are going to succeed and some are going to fail. But you're going to have to be real nimble and smart to identify which of the ones are going to be successful that you choose to target.
Okay. We might have we've got about 3 minutes for questions. Right here.
I'd just be curious to hear from each of you. If you were starting up a new company, a new brand, a new website, what would be 1 or 2, strategic and actionable things that you would do to gain traction and popularity for that? I'm not talking about a big budget, an entourage or somebody that already has traction. And I saw the stuff you guys did on MySpace. It was very cool. It was great. But, that was
Thanks.
entourage and had
Right.
If you started something from scratch, what would be a good sort of strategic angle to gain traction?
I think you would be really well served if you created a blog and spoke honestly about how you're creating.
How would you get your blog out there?
That's, I mean, well, what do you
Content.
if you're creating something that is going to be to a market, then you have to find that market and communicate with them and talk to them on their blog, et cetera, et cetera. That would be probably the easiest and most cost-effective way.
Right. And you know, and I think you also, going back to what I said earlier about the product sampling, I think you want to get it in the hands of the right people,
Right.
especially if you feel strongly about it. So, and you know, empower them to talk about it just by using it. So it's the same way YouTube got to where it is today, when everyone just, you know, MySpace didn't have a way for you to easily upload and embed videos. Bam, along comes YouTube. Everyone uses it. Now YouTube is, you know, competes with MySpace. You're not going to be the next YouTuber MySpace, everybody.
Yeah.
But the fact remains is that, you know, there's an opening, a niche, or, you know, maybe you have a better product than somebody else, and it's just getting it into in the hands of the right people that, you know, are influential enough to get other people to use it. It's influencing the influencers.
It's I think that's an impossible question to answer without
Knowing what it
more information, right? I mean, if you were marketing a movie, I mean, if we were doing Blair Witch today, we would have put our clips on YouTube. And we would have had a blog instead of a website that we had to constantly recreate the HTML for every time to update. You know, but we had a forum at the time, since that's what we could do. You know, it just depends on what it is you're doing.
Yeah. But it's about building community. I mean, especially if you're starting from the beginning and you have that mindset, I think it's really different. It's not about just pushing this product, it's about pushing the entire experience, your company, the people. So I would think about it from the get-go, build a good infrastructure. It's not about just an initial hit or an initial buzz for 3 months. I mean, you've got to be thinking 1, 2, 3 years down the line.
Yeah, and I think there are great examples out there. If you look at, I'm going to choose a couple technology companies because they really embrace the whole community aspect of everything. You've, you know, Firefox, and, you know, they'll do a competition where you create a Firefox commercial, or, you know, 6 Apart, and you get this whole you know, you get this whole community built around like a community that blogs about blogs and blogging. I mean, but that's kind of, you know, what you really want to do with that community, like Sheethal said.
Yep.
Okay, let's see. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, what do you think is the best way to like monetize existing social networks that have a lot of traffic, a lot of stuff? Like LinkedIn, for example, just does this thing. If you want to reach someone you don't know, mail a letter to them. I mean, what are the creative ideas we see to monetize the high volume of traffic social networks?
Here's kind of a simple one. And one of our cultural investigators, he's a student at Carnegie Mellon, and he was telling me how he's on Facebook and he's got a lot of friends on his profile. He goes to this local pizzeria, and the manager is really smart and said, "Hey, well, will you just write about the fact that you went to my pizzeria today, and I'll give you free pizza for a year." And so he does, and he's gotten a lot more people to come to his pizzeria. But that's kind of a simple way.
Yeah, I think, you know, it's also the promotion of content is, I mean, for content producers, being able to get your content seen by more people is a good thing, especially if it's an editorial fit in these places. So I think, you know, one of the strengths that someone like MySpace has is, you know, if you've ever seen like something they do for the secret shows, the concerts, I mean, they get the word out there for people, and these shows sell out. I mean, it's just the power of, and it's not even an editorial voice, it's just the power of the promotion that they can leverage, you know, the putting in a featured space on everyone's profile about something that's coming up. I mean, it's not necessarily standard ad inventory, but it's certainly something that these networks are using. And then it's the customized promotions built around it. Like Tag World did a gigantic promotion with Snakes on a Plane, you know, for you know, to find an unsigned band to put on the soundtrack. I mean, you're not looking at standard ad inventory, you're looking at, you know, more of an experience. So I think it's the monetization of experiences that these guys, you know, really need to focus on, you know, if they're going to if they're going to try to sell advertising to marketers looking for results, that's going to be where they're going to need to focus, is on the experience rather than just the ad inventory. Because that can be sold by the ad networks, and they are.
So if you want to engage the community, you've got feedback, right, from all the levels. So how do you manage the signal to noise ratio as far as which kind of feedback you take, which kind of feedback you take?
You mean feedback to give back to the community, or feedback to take as like, you know, looking at the performance of a campaign?
Same as the noise ratio, because I'm sure there'll be lots of noise amongst the feedback.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's really. I mean, you're looking at some of it. A lot of it is anecdotal. I mean, a lot of it is just, you know, looking back and like saying, all right, so someone, you know, we did a promotion for this movie, this Fox movie called Date Movie, right? So we had this really unique campaign where, you know, we had this guy who would, you know, one of the actors from the film who would appear in a video frame adjacent to your MySpace profile and totally make fun of it, saying, all right, you know, who chose your colors, Stevie Wonder, you know, like stupid things like that. You know, and then he'd come back and he'd pimp out your profile, which was, we were making fun of the trend that was, you know, people pimping out their MySpace profiles. And then, you know, after they did that, they were exposed to the trailer, and we got tens of thousands of comments about the trailer. Now, we can sit through each and every one and grade it as positive or negative or neutral, but you know, at the end of the day, there were tens of thousands of comments, and there were tens of thousands of comments that were, you know, scientifically overwhelmingly positive. You know, there's a lot going on, and it's not a science. It's more of a, like I said, it's that experience, and you know, the numbers are the science part of it. But I think, you know, there's a lot of noise. There's a lot of things going on here. There's a lot of components. There are people from all over the world interacting with this stuff, and it's not like a direct mail piece. It's not direct response. It's not Google.
You have to look at the whole picture, not just like the comments or the discussion on the forum, but you have to look at the discussion on the forum, your traffic patterns, what people are saying outside, and you take it all into account. So.
And sometimes some of the bad press isn't bad. I mean, it causes discussion, and that can be really good too. So. But
personally, what I've done on these campaigns, and when a campaign starts up, I read everything because it's easier. And we do campaigns sometimes that run for 3 months, and they're kind of live and very interactive and narrative. And what I'll do is I'll pick up 10 or 15 people who are into what we're doing or get what we're doing or have an interesting perspective, and then I'll track everything they're saying, because they tend to engage with everything with what everybody's saying. So I can kind of find out if there's a hot point by, oh, look, this person's really involved, and look at what they're saying, and that's where how I'll look deeper.
I would like to say that if you're doing stuff in the community, you're going to have to pay attention to it. So unfortunately, there may be noise. You may just have to pay attention to that noise as well, because you don't want to let the noise get out of control and squelch the signal. So
yeah, I mean, if that's happening, something's very wrong with your campaign.
Right.
Yeah.
Or your brand. I mean, you know, you got to really pay attention to it.
Okay. Well, thank you, everyone. Thanks again to all our panelists for your time.